Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Halfway with Jeremy Roden. And tonight, hang on, we have another Roden joining us. And my cousin, Bailey Rodin, is here to talk to us about her journey into the world of agriculture and agribusiness. But most importantly, the influence that she is having on others at the high school level who may be interested in pursuing ag as a career. I think you'll learn something. She's a graduate of Arizona State University with honors and has also served in the FFA at the state level as an officer. And I think you'll enjoy hearing about her story and her accomplishments. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So, born and raised in Queen Creek, Arizona, lived there for 22 years, and then graduated from Queen Creek High School, and then decided Arizona State University was new home. I majored in global agribusiness. Junior year of college, I decided to do an internship, and what that looked like was picking a dot on the map, and that led to a full-time job, which was in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and that's now where I call home. I commute into Kansas because we're relatively close to a lot of states, and I teach agriculture education in Southwest Kansas.
I know that you consider yourself early career and there's a lot of goals that you still want to accomplish. But what first got you interested in agriculture? Because us being related, our family, we have roots in Northwest Texas. My dad, your grandfather, they grew up in this very, very small town actually called Halfway, which is the inspiration for this show. It was small town USA, cotton, wheat, soybean, a little bit of everything, Dust Bowl at sometimes. But were you inspired by some of the stories you heard, or were you exposed to something? Tell us a little bit about that and how you got to really searching this career, this industry.
Was very fortunate to be raised around livestock. My whole family was super involved with horses. I think my sister's 1 year raised lambs for 4-H, but we have big age gaps. So I was always so far behind them, and we didn't get to do all the traditional sports together and all of those things. I remember very vividly, we had roping calves at our house one day. The thing I was so excited about was like going out and hanging out with them, feeding them, watering them. And so I just appreciated the mundane and stewardship that comes with the livestock industry. That's my earliest memory of that. And I was probably like 6. I'm pretty sure I named one of the roping calves Miley after Hannah Montana. So that is where my love just from being around the animals, seeing, I just loved it so much. And then flash forward to high school, my dad, he is, just a great guy, but he was really pushing me to take intro to agriculture. I didn't know, I was going from 8th grade to 9th grade, didn't know what to do with I had one more spot left for my elective, and dad was really pushing for intro to agriculture. But I didn't know if it was for me. Heard some of the other kids, like one of my best friends was like, oh yeah, I'm going to take intro to ag. I was like, okay, I'll put it on there. Because, you can't listen to your parents first. You have to
That's
go
right. That's right.
get a survey. Yeah. And then I took intro to agriculture, and my ag teacher I think my dad and my ag teacher were two big components on just altering. Like, I never realized that would alter the trajectory of my life and what path I was going to take, but it sure did.
When that was going on, did you realize at the time that connection, that influence, or did you get into your career seeing what you were accomplishing? I would hear the stories about your dad telling what you were doing in high school and in college, and then see things on social media. But did you make that connection that influence was there early on, or did it take some time?
I think it definitely took some time. And, when you're in a situation like when you're so close to it, you can't appreciate what is happening for you. But really, my dad and my ag teacher had poured just so much belief into me. Like, I always tell people, like, we're going to talk about women in ag. I'm so lucky for the dad that I have, because I didn't know that there was no difference between me and my brothers of what we did around the house. Like, I was out there with my dad when he's like building fences, or I'm out there with my dad. I'm throwing my saddle over my horse. My dad never let me think that there was a difference or that was a discrepancy. And so when I decided that I wanted to go into like cattle feeding, I wanted to check out the industry. Didn't know if I wanted to do it forever, but knew I wanted to check it out. I didn't know that would be a difference. I just knew that I could go do that because of the way I was raised by my dad and my mom. And my mom's the same way. Like, she is an outspoken woman. Like, if she believes something, she's going to say it. And so that taught me that I can take up space if I need to, and it's okay. It doesn't matter who I am. Like, if I have something to say, I need to share it.
I love the fact that you agreed to do this. One, I think the world of your dad. I grew up as a kid around Tim and Tom, my cousins, my dad's, brother Gene, his kids. And I was always around them from a young age. All of us, all the cousins were, we always kind of hung out, and they were just superstars in my view. And they were certainly, as my dad used to describe, challenging. So Tim, if you're listening to this, you know exactly what I'm referring to, and getting that talk from my dad. But there was a level of respect there. I understood as a kid looking up to my cousins, and there was a work ethic that I could see very clearly when we were always around each other, especially when I was in Arizona and we lived, a couple blocks away, and the animals were out back. Uncle Gene had all the birds. He would do this stuff for Arizona State. So where I'm going with this, tell me about the work ethic, because sometimes I can barely get my kids to take out the trash, right? That's a chore just to ask them to do it.
I think it's just like such a respect that I have for my dad. And because I see him work so hard, and I knew that's the type of person I wanted to be. My dad has a big heart and he works hard. And so if at the end of the day those are my two identifiers, I'm going to be okay with that. And so my dad is unique in this way though, that if his kids want to do something, we're doing it 120%. So the best example I have for that is I decided I wanted to raise a lamb for the county fair. And so before I know it, though, dad has a pig and a steer showing up at our house because we're going to do this 120%. It's just the belief he has in you that there's nothing you can't do. And it almost just makes you want to work hard because you know somebody's just cheering you on no matter if you win or lose. I remember when we were at a jackpot one weekend and I won a grand champion showmanship buckle, and my dad cannot contain himself. He's like cheering so loud. I'm getting embarrassed because I'm a high schooler, but that's just the type of like environment I got to grow up in, was, having parents who do nothing but encourage you.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and I looked up to him so much, both Tim and Tom. And one of the things that the funny thing, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Oklahoma at our big family reunion. You've been there, and your dad had seen episode one of the podcast, and he said, "Hey, we were playing golf," and that's a whole other story of him heckling me as I'm trying to tee off.
I'm
That's
sure.
great. You want some entertainment? Come watch a golf tournament at the reunion. It's hilarious. But anyway, we were talking, and he said, "Hey, have you considered interviewing Bailey, for the podcast?" And I said, "She's already on the list." And I was always inspired by hearing your father talk about your accomplishments, because not everybody, not every kid is going to go to college, and they're either going to go out and start working a trade. And I think a lot of teenagers, and I've certainly coached several along the years, undergraduate level and even grads, that they're still searching for their place in the world. And one thing that I love about your industry is agribusiness and agriculture. It's kind of under the radar sometimes, and people forget why people are showing animals at stock shows. Can you kind of educate our audience, those that are new to some of this terminology? What is a stock show? Why is it important? Why do people go and put all this time and care in animals, and then they get awarded these ribbons? Where I'm not very far from the Fort Worth Stock Show, because I went to high school in Fort Worth. It's a big deal, but there are some that don't understand that it goes beyond just the entertainment, of the stock show. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. There's currently like four species: goats, lambs, pigs, and cattle that are shown for like consumption purposes. And so students will raise these animals, develop muscle, learn how to show them, learn like the different cuts of their animals, all the different care of their animal. And then they'll go to their county fair. There's also jackpots now, which is like weekend shows where they go get practice and then ultimately sell that animal for human consumption, and it goes right back into the industry. But the beautiful thing, so actually our program has a sponsorship program, and so we sponsored a student this year, and this was his first like time raising a lamb, and it's just so cool to see that connection they get of like taking care of an animal and the pride that they have. And it's so exciting. I think it gets students and kids, because you can start as early as 7, I want to say. I'd have to check the 4-H age, I'm not sure, but they start pretty young, and they're just learning that like the world is so much bigger than themselves. Like, you're taking care of an animal, you're learning that work ethic, you're learning that something else depends on you every single day, to feed it twice a day, to wash it, to take care of its hair, all of those things. So it's so much more than it gets credit for. I totally agree with that. But I think the kids that are a part of it, they get such great, valuable life lessons that you can't always get in the classroom. I think we have to acknowledge that some of those education standpoints don't come from the classroom all the time. They come from places like stock shows.
And you're learning by doing, right? You go out there and, maybe your dad or somebody that's influencing you is teaching you something about a particular animal, and you'll probably make mistakes. It's guaranteed, but it's a life lesson. And a story that Uncle Gene and my dad used to talk about around halfway, that, there was not a Home Depot down the street. There was not a big box store down the street where something broke. People had to figure out how to do things with what they had. And, the house they were living in, before they lived, what's essentially government housing on the lot, county lot. They lived on a small farm just north of the county lot, and one of their cows came down with rabies. And that particular cow, was, I think the cow's name was Judy, if I'm not mistaken, was infected by a fox, a fox that had been in the area. And a lot of the local farmers had put pressure on the family, and they had to slaughter all their livestock because they did not want the rabies to spread to, other towns.
Right.
And
I think that story that you just told about like grandpa and your dad though is like it's not guaranteed to be pretty. Like there are such trials and tribulations of the industry, and sometimes I think that's what's hard about getting the younger group in it. And I didn't always have great luck either. Like we had a dog come and attack like our animals one time. And I think that was going into my senior year. So it's like, what do you do now? Like what do I do now? We're too far to get another one, things like that. So it's not always pretty, but it's making sure you are taking care of the livestock. It's holding people that are there accountable, holding yourself accountable to just give it the best that you can. In terms of like the best story I ever had was probably this lamb beetle and all the show steers I ever had. We live in Arizona, so it's super hot. So I had to spray my steers off like 3 times a day to let them keep their hair. And so that'll teach you some work ethic around the clock, making sure you're getting out there, spraying them down and working their hair. I also worked with my lamb like 3 times a day because I wanted to make sure that I was a good showman and that we just had it together. But
the details mattered, right?
yeah, it wasn't like a chore to me though. It was like I'm excited to go out there and work with the animals because, I am so passionate about the industry and I just loved it so much, and I felt lucky that I got to have it right in my backyard. And I think that came from my dad, and I also did like a sponsorship program where we had students who lived in suburban homes. We would keep their animals at our house or at like the school farm, but we would sponsor their steer and help them with how to like take care of it and show it. I just had after that, like I have such an appreciation that it was right in my backyard. I walked outside and I got to go take care of my animals. And so I feel really lucky, and I wish I could describe this feeling to people who just don't understand, who are just so disconnected from agriculture or the farm, because it really just changes your perspective on like how sweet life is. I think personally.
When you and I reconnected at one of our reunions, I think you were about 9 years old. And I remember leaving that reunion, and my wife and I were driving in the car, and I said, Bailey is awesome. She is such a cool cousin. Her wit and her humor, I said, she's going to be going somewhere. Like, she is just full of ambition. And I can still see that today, whether it's Tim describing your accomplishments, but just how you're so confident that this is your calling and that this is part of you. This is the fabric and the thread of what you do and what you think about every day. So, where I want to go with this is advocacy and how you started to transition from caring for the animals and learning all of the tasks and skills needed to go and show an animal. But when you got to the high school level and things kind of leveled up and FAA, all of that, when did it kind of get serious beyond what you were doing just at the house? Was that high school or was that much younger?
I would say high school. I remember this so clearly in my head is in FFA, your first intro to agriculture education class, it's like every single freshman has to say the FFA creed. So it's a 5 paragraph thing about like what FFA means, like what's the foundation of it. So you get in front of your peers and you say the FFA creed. I didn't think I did that good. I really was not amped up about the way I did it. And I went up to my agriculture education teacher, Mr. Eric Stevens, and I said, I know I didn't do very good. So what's my grade on it? He goes, I actually wanted to talk to you about doing the creed competition for district. And then I was able to go on to state. And so I remember like, and my dad would probably tell you the same thing. Eighth grade going into ninth grade, we didn't know what Bailey's future was. We didn't know what was going on. But I
A
had
hard year. I mean, you're getting just bombarded by influences, and you're still trying to be a kid and be a teenager. Yeah, I can imagine.
it's such a hard year. And, my dad had even had a conversation with me about it. We're really excited with the way it went because we didn't know what was going to happen. But I will say, like, Mr. Stevens and my dad, like, just pouring that belief into me. Like, I just thought I did horrible. And here he is saying, hey, let's go try the speech contest. What do you think about that? And I got to go on to state, and Mr. Stevens just was so great about, like, okay, what do we like? He gave me the confidence, and then later he would say, now Bailey, it's time to like reel in and appreciate where we're at, because after my freshman year I said, I'm gonna do the state officer thing, I want to go do this, I want to go do this. And he's like, okay, we're gonna get there, but now let's
The
appreciate.
foundation.
Yes, let's
Is he
appreciate
still
where we're at.
teaching?
I don't think he's teaching anymore, but he had left my senior year, or like going into my senior year, and I remember crying. I did not think I would be so sad that a teacher was leaving. And then, truthfully, I had a really rough senior year with the new teacher that we got. We just did not get along, and it was a really weird dynamic that almost ruined the whole thing for me. Where, like, my dad and I were talking about, like, I don't think I can run for state office. I don't know what that looks like. Almost changed the whole trajectory for me there again. But
Unfortunate.
I know.
I mean, teachers matter. I mean, my math teacher in high school changed my life. I was had zero confidence. It takes that one teacher that influences your future, and you could have one bad teacher that just can wreck things. And obviously, it's going to be your choice whether or not you let that impact you. I try to teach my kids that it's not somebody else's place to tell you that you can't love to do this particular thing and think they've got control over you. No, you be you. You keep moving forward. In my case, I was terrible at math going into high school. And I remember as a freshman, I think I had like a 56 average. And my math teacher, Mrs. Pender, at the time, just changed my world, and ended up having her for geometry and algebra too. And I was able to grow my GPA almost to a 4.0 by the time I was a senior and go to college. And it takes that one teacher. So in ag, when that all happened, when did the confidence come back that I'm not letting this person get in my way? Like, move it. I'm Bailey Rodin, get out of my way. I've got things to do. So when did you make that decision?
Not gonna lie, I went home and cried after school quite a bit because it's like this thing that you love so much is no longer that. Or what does it look like? Um, Truthfully, like, I had Mr. Stevens. Okay, what do we do to fix this? If you need help, he actually had to be the one to sign my state officer paper still, because of like the whole situation was
So he
just.
was aware of all of this. Like you reached out to him when all this was going down.
I just said, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't even know if this is what I want to do anymore, because it just took the fire right out from under me. And then I'm so glad I didn't let it, though, because I had to realize that the purpose was bigger than myself. I didn't want to just run for state office for Bailey. I wanted to run for state office because, like, during that year you get to serve students of all different walks of life, and that felt important to me. And so just remembering that, I think if you can always have a purpose bigger than yourself, it's a lot easier to get up in the morning, because sometimes if it's just for yourself, you're like, I don't feel like doing that. So I'm not gonna. So I think having Mr. Stevens and my dad was like, you have worked so hard for all of this. You cannot let one person. And I think it was a great life lesson, because doesn't matter how old you get, doesn't matter where you're at, you're gonna have one person who just is not there in your best interest, and that's okay.
Yeah, the challenge is going to be there at some point. We're all in this messy middle of our lives, and we get to make the choice whether or not we're going to take advantage of that friction, that hard step to move forward. And
Yeah. So I even acknowledge, I think now at 25, that maybe I didn't handle it the best at 17. I also don't know that that was my job to handle it the best, but I do give grace to everyone that was in the situation, because we were all learning. But running for state office, I got two of my very best friends from that experience. And just, it's just something I could never replace. Like, I'm so glad that I did it. met students from all over the state of Arizona. We went to Washington, D.C., and talked to our Congress members on, because FFA is federally chartered. And so we went and talked to our Congress members, and just experiences that I don't think I would have any other way, or that it would feel the same. And so I feel so lucky. And I've got to coach some people through the state officer process from Arizona. And it's just so sweet every time to watch people entering that process. Whether you get it or not, you have so much growth. I got the bid from Arizona FFA to run for national FFA office. And I did not get national FFA office. That was like the first big like no I've received, and probably a no I worked so hard for, but I learned so much about myself. And I would never take that year that I got to just focus on who is Bailey, what do we want out of life, what is our why. I don't think I'd have that opportunity in any other part of my life. So I will always sing the praises of the National FFA organization, because it feeds so much into kids that sometimes I don't think they realize. And something that's cool is it's not just for farm kids, right? Like I come from a more, I was raised on an acre and a half, but we come from a more urban area. Like I graduated with 557 kids, and we had an ag program. It's for the urban kids, it's for the rural kids, it's for everyone. It's leadership development with a focus on agriculture.
Yeah. So tell me about the Future Farmers of America Association, FFA. What's their mission? Why should people care about it? And what are some of the lessons that you learned just being involved in the organization, even today?
Yeah. I have, like I said, learned so much. And it's actually funny because it started as like a boys club essentially, right? Like back when it started in 1929, boys were involved in agriculture, and women were involved in more of like homemaking clubs. It wasn't until 1969 that women got to be let in. And actually, before we were even let in, we were women were involved in more of like a pageantry type set. We were like women could be chapter sweethearts, and they get a special white corduroy jacket. They actually have a white corduroy jacket in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., which is super cool. But we got it let in 1969, and I'm so thankful that they decided to do that. And you see women taking on a lot of leadership roles in the National FFA organization, state officers, national officers, all of that, as well as men. This is what I think really changed the trajectory of my life as well. Is we have something called career development events, and so those are our competitions, but they are based on real workplace practicums. And so a contest I love so much was like my speech contest. So I gave a prepared public speech on the misunderstanding of antibiotics in beef. And then we also had agricultural sales contests, where you go in and you're given like, one year we were given like a John Deere tractor, like some, and we went in and sold that. Or one year we were given corn seed and we had to go sell it. And so you're getting real life work experience on what a sales call looks like and what a no can look like, and how to keep going from that. But we have livestock judging, dairy judging, floriculture, horticulture, agronomy. We have so much. And so it really is for every single student that wants to step in there and try their hand at workplace experiences and see what's for them, win some competitions, meet some great people. Like it really is just an all well rounded experience for students.
So that educational opportunity is something that you started to value early on when
Yes.
the FFA was providing those various events and opportunities. Tell us about that educational experience and how it fueled you to want to, advocate for the industry and pass it on to others, and kind of what led you to teaching. And I want to get to in your journey at Arizona State and that process, but with the FFA in particular at a high school level, when you start discovering all those great things, is that where you started to value the educational and the learning and development component of the organization?
I promised I would always be an advocate for agriculture education and like keeping it in schools and like just singing the praises that agriculture education teachers do. But honestly, I rejected the idea of being an agriculture education teacher for so long because I had one of the best. I didn't think I could be that good to students. Like I didn't think, I just had the best. When you have the best, it's so hard to imagine how you could possibly measure up to that. So that did not even cross my wheelhouse until about like 2 years ago. That, you know what, Bailey, you want to be back in the classroom so bad. You want to help with the FFA component. Why not go be an agriculture education teacher? And so I have actually texted Mr. Stevens so many times with like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. Can you help me? And so he's a great resource and mentor even now. I've always had appreciation for it, like I said, but I just didn't think I was capable of doing that, I guess.
Maybe there's a future episode where we have Mr. Stevens and Bailey Rodin on the podcast and tell us those stories back in the day. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Mr. Stevens, you're listening to this, don't be surprised if Bailey reaches out. So we'll see. Stay tuned. You're a very strong-willed and fierce woman when it comes to work ethic and accomplishing things. Tell me about how some of that was rubbing off on your fellow classmates in high school. And then when you take us in the transition of going to Arizona State, when you were getting recruited to go to school there and then eventually graduate with honors.
I think sometimes I was seen as like the crazy FFA nerd. Truthfully, I would feel like that's my identifier.
Is that a thing in high school? Is the FFA nerd?
I
Kind of like,
think there had
oh,
to have been. Like who what how many kids are okay with just rolling in blue corduroy and like, like that's their thing, you know? There's a lot, there's over 1 million now, but like I went to an urban school, so it wasn't so usual, but it was my whole life. Like I loved it and I dedicated so much time to it. But I don't know, I just speculate, but I think Mr. Stevens, so I have a very good friend Courtney. Her and I both went to run for state office together. We got on the same team, but we were the same exact age. We did all the same contests pretty much. And I think Mr. Stevens knew that if he put us together, we would work either like we were both going to be proud of whatever we accomplished, but we would work super hard knowing that, like, hey, your competition's right next to you. And so I learned a lot of like, number one, being a good teammate in that way. And number two, being a good competitor. If you win or I win, it's both a win because I saw how hard you worked and you saw how hard I worked. And so I just think that that was a valuable lesson. But yeah, I think I was just the crazy kid that was excited about it, but I also loved being in the classroom because so many different walks of life entered Mr. Stevens' classroom. And I had the opportunity to engage with them and invite them to be a part of our organization, be a part of our chapter, our school club. And it was there that I learned the power of a personal invite. And that is something I try to teach my kids right now is like,
wow. Yeah. Tell us about that.
yeah, you can send an email, you can send a text. Some people genuinely don't think that's for them. I'm one of those people sometimes, like, I'll get a mass email and I'm like, that's not for me. That's not my calling. But if you take the time to go learn about somebody, where they come from, and connect what we're doing to them and give them that personal call to action, they are 100 times more likely to have buy-in to what you are doing if you're tailoring it to like their experience and what they're doing. And so I tried to emulate that in my classroom currently is like giving a call to action, trying to learn my students and what's best for them. Because not every student's going to be the best at livestock judging, and that's okay. Not every student's going to be the best at entomology. I certainly would not have been that kid, but we have those. And so, how do we let them know that this classroom's for them too?
Yeah. And the industry is so big. There's so much that you
Absolutely.
can do. That discovery along the way to me is just a whole other opportunity for kids looking for what they want to do, in the world. So, oh wow, that's incredible.
IT has even entered the agriculture space, right? We have drone flying in agriculture for spraying crops and things like that. Like, it is so vast. There's literally something for everyone. Even if you just love agriculture and you want to be agriculture adjacent in some way, somehow, I promise you there is a job for you out there in agriculture.
I'm interested in hearing your perspective on women in agriculture and agribusiness. One of my former students at LSU works for John Deere, and she's actually been a guest speaker. And the innovations that she has talked about in her role, she's got a marketing related role, project management type role, very dedicated individual to the company. And the things that I've seen just in the media, the electric tractors, John Deere's got a fully electric tractor now. Tell me about some of the innovations and the improvements of ag and maybe some of the women that you have met or learned about over the years and the impact that they're having on this industry, this what used to be a very traditional, like you described, very traditional industry that was once for the men.
Yeah, I think the technology entering the industry is absolutely insane. Like when I worked at the feed yard, all that you see that is a part of a feed yard is, it just scratches the surface of like technology and tracking and everything that they do. A woman that just always comes to my mind, and I teach about her every year, or like since I've started teaching, I make sure she's involved in my classes. I teach about her somehow, is Temple Grandin. She's a very famous woman. She has autism, but she actually went to Arizona State, and so she was doing research on cattle handling, and she just would visit feed yards and she knew there had to be a better way for cattle handling. And she discovered what they like, the pressure in the chute, funneling in tubs. And so she figured that out and put research out on it. And I would say a lot of like processors and feed yards have adapted that Temple Grandin mindset. And so you could walk into a lot of those cattle places and there's Temple Grandin influences, which I think is so special that that came from a woman who, number one, wasn't necessarily in industry, and number two, a woman in general. And
Yeah,
so
it just takes an idea, right? And then somebody to believe in that individual, and all of a sudden it can change the whole trajectory of the industry. That's amazing. A funny story, years ago, I can't remember if it was Jude. I think it was Jude, my now 15-year-old. He loves animals. Both my kids love animals. But Jude, we're on this trip one time to a friend of ours, farm, kind of ranch area. They had arranged a tour to a dairy farm, and there was this machine, and I sat there staring at it because I couldn't believe it was actually happening. You're probably not going to know exactly what I'm about to describe. But we get out of the truck, and the kids are going inside, and they're looking at everything. And there's the milk cows and then the beef cows. And those of you listening, there is a difference. And some of the milk cows, you'll see they're traditional black and white, and then you have the cows that are kind of a tan camel color. I walk up to this fence, and there's this machine that looks like this rolling brush that all the cows were lining up to get a scratch. So what is that thing? Is that something new that happened in the cattle industry? I mean, it was this machine that apparently cost thousands of dollars, and these cows would come up to get a scratch. They move out of the way. The other cow would walk up. Nobody was helping them. It was just automatic. It was the
yeah,
funniest thing I've ever seen. What is that?
I love that you bring that up because honestly, I think people underestimate that. Like traditional consumers on any animal agriculture is animal welfare is at the forefront of everything that these operations are doing. And
Mhm.
so that if you can make your animal happier, more relaxed, more comfortable, all those things, your milk producing abilities is going to be higher, your beef producing abilities is going to be higher. And so while that may, like, you're right, it is a silly thing, but it is actually increasing production and it's increasing animal welfare. And so it's just, I really wish all people would go take a tour of like a dairy or a feed yard and just see all that goes into like taking care of these animals.
Oh, I love it. And, Jude, both Jack and Jude, the school that they attended from, preschool all the way to eighth grade, now they're in high school. There was a particular teacher at their school who everybody loves, and they would get these chickens, these chicks from Texas A&M, and they would at the end of the lesson would send the chicks home with the kids, and they weren't sexed, so you didn't know whether or not they were roosters or hens. And they would go to these families, and you hear the stories, don't accept the chickens. But anyway, kids come home and present this idea to me, and Tracy was telling me about it, and I said, look, I'll consider it, but we can get a coop on Amazon. Hold the phone for a second. Look who you're talking to, guys. We're gonna build a chicken coop. We're gonna do this the right way. And I go out and started building this. I think it housed about 15 chickens. It's got
Wow.
tons of photographs. Have to maybe share on Instagram. But I taught them how to care for backyard chickens, and I didn't need, you know, a local lesson or anything. I grew up around a lot of that as a kid, and then watching a lot of you and various people in West Texas, where my parents are from, raise cattle and chickens, everything. And so I learned a lot of that just by observing. And I'd go over the holidays with my uncle Steve, and he was raising cattle. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I love taking care of those. And then you realize how many eggs you're getting. You get an
Right.
egg a day, from a chicken typically. And it's fascinating, but it was such a great teaching moment for the kids. And we've since moved from that house. And, we have a lot of fond memories of that time because the boys helped me build a coop. And we had an outside run. I, taught them how to protect them from the hawks, the red-tailed hawks, and various animals that would come looking for them. And, we never lost a chicken to a fox or a hawk or anything like that, even a possum. But we took very good care of them. And I noticed when we fed them the right feed, I wouldn't just give them the pellets. We would do a mixture of various grains, and we got better eggs. So, what is the industry doing as far as innovation now with whether it's cattle, chickens, the things that you've been exposed to? What are some of the innovations that have happened over the years, and where did those influences come from? Basically, the science of it. Like, have you been exposed to that part of the industry?
I actually have a friend who lives like not far from me here. She has a master's in ruminant nutrition. And so we've had many conversations about all the science that goes into feeding cattle because I think some people think that feed yards are just, some grain or
Too
corn and
large
call it good.
lots, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but really they all have different rations for like what stage they're at, especially formulated for them to grow. Um, they also have to take into account like when the weather's too hot or when it's cold or when it's going to snow, things like that. So there is such a science that goes into it. And actually, at the feed yard during my internship and when I worked there after I came back, the feed department was my favorite because I always just feel like they are having to watch the cattle. They have to know cattle very well. So there's just so much that goes into it. There is a science, but then there's also that human element of knowing what your pins look like, knowing what's normal behavior for your cattle and things like that. So that was always really cool.
Like I smoke brisket. I love smoking brisket. I've been doing
Mhm.
it for a long time, and I was talking to a friend recently about. They were talking about the price of beef and whatnot, prime versus choice and different cows. And I said it matters. It shows you that how those animals were taken care of. That end product, it does matter, and that's what you're paying for. And when you decided you weren't sure whether or not you were going to continue the path, running for state office, all of that. But when you got the attention of Arizona State, was that the fuel you needed to continue on? Tell us about your experience and how that was different from your high school experience and how just the world started to open up at Arizona State and being a Sun Devil.
Yeah, so there's like a section of our FFA contests that were at Arizona State, the Polytechnic campus, and so our district contests were always there, and our midwinter state contests were always there. And I always remember like Mark Manfredo, he works in our Morrison School of Agribusiness. He was at all of them, very excited. I need to find someone who loves Arizona State more than Dr. Manfredo because he loves Arizona State. But truthfully, they had gotten a few other Queen Creek High School alumni and Queen Creek High School FFA alumni over there. And so I got to go talk to them and I knew the campus really well and um, got to meet Dr. Manfredo, saw all the cool stuff they were doing and just like it just felt like home. Like it didn't feel like it was a weird college experience, like scary. I knew day one I was excited to be there and they had so many clubs that Queen Creek High School FFA alumni were already a part of. So it was cool to like walk into the college setting, but still have familiar, friendly faces there. And so that was really cool. While I was there, they restarted up the Sigma Alpha chapter, which is an agriculture professional sorority. So we got to be a part of that. Arizona Farm Bureau or American Farm Bureau has this program called Young Farmers and Ranchers on a collegiate level. And we started a chapter there. We even got to go compete in Discussion Meet, which is a contest that they have where you talk about agricultural issues. I got to go to nationals for them one year. Like just so many doors were open, and I will sing the praises of Arizona State as well. It was such a great experience, and I even people were giving me a hard time when I would go talk to high schoolers in Arizona because I'm like, Arizona State's the best. And they're like, you're just saying that you went there. I'm like,
You have some loyalty, right? Yeah,
yeah, I'm
yeah,
like,
of
that's how
course.
I know it's the best. I don't even have to question what else is out there. Like, I had such a good experience.
Yeah. I think it is an amazing school. When I lived in Arizona, my dad bought me a sweatshirt, and I think it was the Pac-10 back then, I'm not mistaken, and it had the Sun Devil on top. And I remember going to the campus at a very young age, and I just was enamored by how awesome it was. And I was like, I'm going to go to Arizona State. Of course, they ended up going to North Texas and then LSU. But I understand the loyalty. I'm probably the biggest UNT, University of North Texas Mean Green, and LSU Tigers fan on the planet. That is, I'm very proud from both of those schools. So I get it. But Arizona State, an incredible program. It sounds like they're putting the funding where it needs to be. What would you say to some of our listeners that are interested in agribusiness, agriculture? What's some advice you can give them? Maybe some of the things that you tell your students today. What's some of the most valuable lessons you learned along the way that you haven't talked about already, or some advice you can give them if they're kind of on the fence?
I think we're growing up like, I feel like the next generation is growing up in a culture where you want to be the smartest person in the room. My whole philosophy has always been like, I heard this quote one time: if I'm the smartest person in the room, I need to go somewhere else. And so I think just being in places where I know I'm not the smartest, but I can ask questions, I can learn, I can like develop a mentorship from these people. Like, I truly believe even if you're scared and you know you're not going to know everything, that is okay, because it's not your job to know everything, but it is your job to go in and be teachable and have a learning mindset and be teachable, be coachable. And so I really think that's the biggest piece of advice. And like, I don't come from a production agriculture background, right? Not necessarily. I was raised around livestock, things like that, but I don't come from a huge operation. And so even when I went into, okay, well, I want to do an internship at a feed yard, we're going to go see what that looks like. I was very candid in all of those interviews that, hey, I'm not from a production ag background. I don't even know if this is what I want to do forever, but I know I want to come learn. I've heard you guys are the best. So let me come learn from that. And I'm not going to lie to you, like, there's probably going to be hesitation. There might be people who think you're crazy every once in a while. That's okay. Let them be wrong about whoever you are. But I remember even in one of those interviews where I was interviewing for the feed yard where they said, well, we need people who are going to want to work here forever. And I said, you might not get that out of me because I want to see what this is like as an internship, but I can guarantee you, you will have a lifelong advocate. I will always advocate for your industry and I will advocate for my experience there and your company if you let me come learn, if you let me try this out. And they did take their chance on me, so that was really nice and great and I'm so thankful for that. But biggest thing ever is just never be afraid to not be the smartest person in the room and never be afraid to go find that smart person and learn everything that you can.
I love that. I wish I could just flip a switch and teenagers that are searching for their next path could understand that completely, because I think today, I mentioned this a couple episodes ago, the influence that friends have on career decisions. They want to get their approval for a particular career choice rather than what you're describing and believing in your passion and being open. I love that. Be coachable. I'll tell that to my kids when they're getting lessons from a particular coach in a particular sport, whether it's baseball, football, lacrosse, is when a coach asks you something, how are you responding? Are you coachable? Will you be willing to play various positions? Are you willing to try something new? Are you willing to try something that you're not very good at, to get better? So it sounds like you were learning those lessons early on. What were some of the challenges that you faced? And I want to kind of get into the challenges that the agribusiness and agriculture industry faces, but what are some of the challenges that you faced, whether high school or college, that was kind of out of your wheelhouse?
Yeah, I think everything. Everything kind of felt like it was out of my wheelhouse at first because I always wore this chip on my shoulder that, like, I'm not from a production agriculture family. But like I said, having the dad that I have, he's like, get out there, go be in those rooms, go be where you need to be. And so the feed yard internship definitely fell out of my wheelhouse. I was like, I'm going to get there and I'm a fraud. Or like, I feel like women maybe struggle with, and I don't know the male brain, but I feel like women always struggle with imposter syndrome. Like, Alona Mayer did a podcast recently where she was talking about this woman who, she's like, a woman will be asked to come back and coach high school basketball. And she played D1 college, but she'll think, well, I didn't play in the WNBA. And that is so true. Like, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can teach these kids because I didn't make it here. But it's like, I am worthy of being in that classroom. I am worthy of being in these places because I love it. And I will like do the best I can to help these kids figure out what's best for them and where they need to go next or where they want to go next. And so there's a lot of things that are going to be out of your wheelhouse, but just showing up every day makes a huge difference. Like at the feeder, like I'm not the strongest person there. I don't know everything, but I showed up and I stood along people who knew what they were doing until I could figure out how to jump in and help. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable sometimes too. And I think that's the hard part for people.
I remember when we lived in Arizona, going over to Uncle Gene's house, your grandfather, and the neighbors next door also had animals. And Uncle Gene, they raised birds, exotic birds for Arizona State and the zoo. And there were so many birds in that backyard; it was incredible, from toucans to macaws. We ended up raising them too as we moved away, and lovebirds and cockatiels. I go on and on and on. But the neighbors to, I believe it was on the right hand side, I had to help birth a goat for the first time, and I was like 10, 9. And it was amazing because you see that life for the first time. It's not just poof, a baby, out of a Disney movie pops into the scene. No, it was graphic and I learned a lot. And I also was listening to the mom that was coaching me because I had to do it. She taught me how to do it. And I'll never forget that. They had these beautiful peacocks too, these beautiful birds next door. But that was my time in Arizona. And I loved it. So let's talk about some of the challenges that agriculture and agribusiness faces. And I'm gonna lead into this by a a joke that a family member once told me about farming because I grew up around, my family in West Texas, cotton, wheat, soybean, everything you can imagine, they were farming because my mother, grew up on a farm and ranch and all my cousins and my uncles. And so I was around it every time we'd go back to Northwest Texas for the holidays. I was around it. And so there's definitely some pride there of having that upbringing and being exposed to that and riding along with my Uncle Steve to go take care of the cattle, count cows, all of that. But being a farmer is going out and taking a loan for $100,000, $300,000, throwing it in a bucket and lighting it on fire and walking away. And that's what he told me. And I was like, and as a kid, you're like, what? And it'd be like, oh, it's the risk. And you don't know if you're going to get the yield on the crop. But it matters. It is a risk. So what are some of the things that you've experienced along the way, whether it's working in the feedlots, some of the lessons that you learned, hearing about some of the challenges, people going broke and losing everything because they weren't as productive or successful. Because as a kid, where we lived, I lived right south of the Red River in North Texas, a little town called Electra. We lived further north of Electra on a ranch. This was way before we moved to the city. I was born in Amarillo, but we lived in the middle of nowhere. It was the greatest playground in the world, rode a motorcycle everywhere. But when we would go to our family in West Texas, we passed all the famous ranches that you would hear about, the Wilbarger Ranch.
Right.
People know about 4.6s because of Yellowstone now, right? I know all of that land out there from where we lived all the way towards San Angelo, all the way going up to Lubbock and halfway where, my parents were raised. But what are some of those challenges that the industry is facing now financially and maybe some of the global economic things that we're hearing about?
Yeah, there is an awful lot, and I'm sure there will be agriculturalists that would probably still agree with that joke to this day, like in their experience. I think all of them have such different experiences. I think feed yards and grain farmers are finding ways to mitigate risk through things like futures markets. I'm not an expert on futures markets, but I find it vastly interesting, which is just a way for them to like buy and sell prices like corn and beef and pig prices and things like that ahead of time to like mitigate risk. But I would say, like, in my perspective, the issue that just like grinds my gears to this day is consumer perspective or consumers' assumptions because I just don't understand how we're in 2025 and we still villainize the farmer and the rancher in the way that we do. But I think part of that might be like industry problem is, are we giving the consumer too much information, like the GMO conversation that we have of like genetically modified organisms, and people thinking that every single thing in their grocery store is now genetically modified unless it has a GMO free label. Well, that's not the truth. There's only about, if I remember correctly, about 11 that are in production. And so it's not like your strawberries are genetically modified or just because they look bigger in the container, those are GMOs. No, they're not. But we've put non-GMO labels on everything, and so it's very confusing to the consumer. I totally get that.
I think the organic conversation is confusing to the consumer.
I think it can be too. I think
The labels, yeah, yeah,
or
I hear what you're saying.
antibiotic free or things like that. Like every animal has to be antibiotic free, or else like the processor sending a hefty fine to the feed yards or whoever sent one, and the feed yard's going to lose their livelihood as well. Like there's so much protocol in ensuring antibiotic safety, and I just feel like consumers don't understand that. I do my best in the classroom to just give out the facts and let you make your own opinion, like my ag teacher did on the GMO conversation. He's like, here are the facts, you get to make your own opinion on it, and I think that's all we can do. But as long as we're opening that conversation and having dialogue, because I really do think there's transparency on the agriculturalist side. But for some reason, consumers still think that we are like the agriculturalists are hiding so many things, but they're not. You're just getting this weird marketing gimmick in the grocery store that makes you question what's right and what's wrong. And so that has grinded my gears since high school. And for some reason, we can still have the same exact conversation about it 7 years later, which is like, I just don't, I think we just keep educating. I don't know.
Yeah. So, yeah, I read in your bio, talking about advocating and educating the consumer. What more can we do? I talk to my wife quite often about this because it bothers me every time I'm in a grocery store. I don't want to give away any names, but the upper tier of grocery stores where a lot of organic stuff is sold, um, there's product that you'll get from local ranchers, stuff that you can't find, at your local Walmart, something like that. And just the amount of the food, whether it's Walmart or one of these grocery stores, how are we having a hunger crisis in America? Why is somebody hungry when we have this much food and this quality of food? And it blows my mind. And maybe I'm missing something, but what can we do as consumers to better educate ourselves and pass on that information based on what you just described and really help the agriculture industry in general?
I think it's just going to take like agriculture literacy. Like you and I have talked about, like, obviously you have engaged your children with like the chicken experience. Like they understand agriculture now, right? From that experience, like they have a connection that so many people don't have now. Like 2% of the population is involved in agriculture. That means the rest of
Two
us are
two
not.
percent. You said 2%.
2%. So they're working to feed the rest of us. So that means so many of us are removed from the farm by so many generations. And so a big thing that FFA programs do is we do day on the farm for elementary school kids and have them come in and learn about it. Like it's a grassroots effort. Absolutely. There's no one all fix. It's going to be communities getting out there and educating 4-H communities, educating the next generation, FFA going out and educating the next generation, because there are some kids, like I've been in situations where the conversation used to be, right, like kids would be like, brown cows make chocolate milk, the black and white cow makes white milk. It's not even like there's some situations where you're in where it's not that, it's like my milk comes from the grocery store.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you something, Bailey, that I don't know if I've ever told you the story, but I was in high school and we were going on a road trip somewhere, some, field trip. I can't even remember what it was. I believe I was a senior. And we were on a bus coming back, and we happened to be passing a ranch that had some sheep out there, and beautiful herd of sheep. And one of the teachers, that was, it may have been one of the moms. In fact, I think it was a mom, if I'm not mistaken, because there were two buses, and we're driving by this field of these sheep, and this person goes, "Look at all the cotton." And I'm like, "What?" And I don't know what I said or if anybody else noticed, but I'll never forget passing that herd of sheep and she saying that phrase, "Look at all the cotton." I was like, "Okay, that's wool."
Right. And I think even my like knee jerk reaction of like covering my mouth is maybe part of the problem, because I think us in agriculture just have to be understanding of like they don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
So we have to like take like the way everybody took time to educate me at the feed yard, things like that. We all have to return that same grace to those who are so far removed from the farm and be like, maybe take a second to chuckle at something like that. Like, I feel like that's fair. Like, no, but this is where we're going. This is what it is. But I just think it's literacy and advocacy, like agriculture literacy and agriculture advocacy, that we just continue to be like need more of as we change
And
generations.
telling the stories of why, and the lessons, and taking the time to teach somebody the importance of why we do something a certain way, or why this exists, or why we feed this animal this. Just last week, we were on the beach, family vacation, and this little boy from Argentina came up to me. And I was sitting there tying a hook, and it was like 6 o'clock at night. And my son was there, a couple other friends were there, and this kid, I'd never seen him before. My kids had never talked to him before. And he had a fishing pole, spoke good English, and he was just wanting to catch a fish. And so he goes, "Can you help me tie, a knot, and teach me how to fish in saltwater right here?" I said, "Absolutely." So 10 minutes of time, nothing, right? Taught him how to build a rig, what bait to use, taught him how to catch the bait on the beach, with the mole crab, all that kind of stuff. And he goes out 15 minutes after us really talking, goes out in the surf. I'm probably 100 yards to his right, and I just see him celebrating. He pulls out this huge redfish out of the ocean. Nobody else was catching anything, but this little kid that was like 10 years old caught his first fish. Well, he ran down the beach after he got the fish off the hook and put it back in the ocean, and it changed his life. And so I walked up to my kids after that, and my kids were very excited. And as much as they don't want to listen to me, I try to teach them something. They have to learn things along the way. But I said, guys, when you complain when I try to teach you something, I said, that's why. I said, so when people come into your life and you have the ability and the knowledge to teach them this, it's going to make an impact on their lives and they're never going to forget it. I said, that kid's life has changed. He's going to tell that story his entire life about the first time he cast that rod in the ocean and caught this redfish. And okay, so let's transition here. I know you've covered so much. I love the theme and just the fierceness of what why you love this industry, just your ambition to be involved and wanting to advance that. So what influence do you think that you're having? I know you're obviously teaching kids and guiding them along the way, but what influence, if you were to kind of pick one or two things, would you like to have or are you having? Tell us a little bit about that.
That is such a good question. I guess I hope the influence I am having, because it's been taught to me, is like I could sum it into like love big. Whoever walks into my classroom, you're welcome. I hope, and I'm cheering for you. Like I want the best for you when you walk into my classroom, because even appreciating an industry that is like harped on the most, or, I don't have the most traditional upbringing either, of just knowing that there's so much grace that every single kid that walks in your classroom needs. And so just hopefully being a fun place for them to learn for 50 minutes out of their day. And we're going to learn something in the classroom, but I also hope you walk away with how to be a better person or how to care for your classmate a little bit more, because I feel like there is a disconnect in soft skills in the next generation that we need to spend some time in the classroom taking care of. And I
Yeah,
think
I agree with you there for sure. Yeah.
yeah, so if I can help foster the soft skills and just caring about your neighbor a little bit more again, I really hope that that is an impact that I leave.
Yeah. And it bothers me when you go to the store or you're driving to work, whatever, and you walk from your car to the office or wherever you're going, running your errand, and people are looking at their phones, right? They're so distracted and they're missing the opportunity around them or meeting somebody and having a conversation and asking questions and then caring about what they're actually telling you. You talked about going and talking with a kid that maybe is curious about the industry. They know whether or not you, their teacher, cares about their stresses of maybe what am I going to do when I graduate high school?
Right.
I've discovered this one thing: is this a career? My wife is the first college graduate in her family, and the things that her family sacrificed, over the years to allow them to go to college. Both of her siblings, same thing. I mean, they all have master's degrees, and it's a big deal. It goes a long way, and that influence. It certainly sounds like you're having that on students. I know that you consider yourself early career, even though you've done an amazing amount of things. What else could be out there for you? Because when I hear your story and I have listened to people describe what you've done and the things that I've seen on social media and just the still images of you on stage talking about, agriculture, there's just a grit in you. I feel like one day you're going to get back into the politics side and the serving side of the industry because I see that in your future. I'm assuming you probably have too.
Well, if you would have asked 18-year-old Bailey, she was running for president. Like that
I
was
do
the
believe that because I was like, that my cousin's awesome. Bailey is awesome. I remember that.
yeah,
So
that
it
was
doesn't
the
surprise
plan.
me.
Well, I'm glad, but I realized that my purpose on earth here is to pour into people. And I think when I decided that, I just care about people so much. And I think sometimes when you get into the side I had looked at as like politics and law is you get lost in the weeds and it's hard for it to always be about people. I think but I just needed a place that had connection with people. And so right now I'm looking at getting my master's in teaching, like agriculture education. And so I'm very excited for that. I've never felt happier. I got to see people who have jobs where they're not always happy showing up and going to work, but I wake up at 5:30. I'm not gonna lie, I hit the snooze a few times, but I'm excited to get up and go see these kids and work with them and stuff like that. We just had our county fair, and those are long days, but it's so worth it to see, these it click for these kids. And so I think this is where I'm supposed to be. I've never felt more sure of something in my life. And so I just feel lucky that I guess am like a chosen person. Like this is my path. This is what I'm called to do, is just pour into people.
I absolutely love that message because, one, you're knowledgeable, you're gifted, you're a very caring, kind person. And I know I'm biased because we're related, but I know that feeling because, even working in the corporate world, I do care about everybody I will interact with. But on the education side, I know that fuel and that passion of waking up because there are people. When I was still teaching high school years ago for Dallas ISD, there were 55 students in that classroom relying on me every day, and some of them did not want to be there. And I would tell stories about, you know, um, just how my mom in particular, being a retired school teacher, influenced me, and how they all had a choice. Every day they had a choice, and and these were high school students, and they all went different ways. And I've had a lot of them reach out to me. Some of them are teachers today. In fact, recently I got a message on social media from one of my students, Janet, if you're listening, I'm talking about you, in one of my art design classes, and she's now a teacher teaching art. And I'm so proud of her. But I know that passion, and it is fuel, and you just know when it makes sense. Like, this is what I was meant to be doing at some level, whether it's part time, full time. And I think that continues to adulthood through college because I meet undergraduate students all the time and graduate students that still need that coaching. And it's not, I think a good teacher, and you've kind of touched on a lot of this, a good teacher is not always going to have the answers. That's not the point, right? It's to have that coach by your side when you do see those challenges, when you do reach that point where something gets hard, and you have that person coaching you along the way. And that's why even today, I tell my students, don't call me professor, call me Jeremy. Don't call me Mr. Roden, call me Jeremy. I want you to see me as a coach. That is my job. I'm here to serve you, not the other way around. And I love that. And I learned that from teachers a long time ago, and especially my mother, being the ultimate influence on education. But that passion is real.
Right.
And I think that you are obviously making a tremendous impact on that youth, and any school that has you on their staff is extremely fortunate to have you involved. And, we're not very far away. I'm in Dallas, and you're in Oklahoma.
Right.
And, it's, I need to definitely come up there and see what you're doing, and maybe see your classroom and see ag. Cause I've never experienced that, in the classroom. I'd love to see a lesson on what that's like.
Yeah, of course. And I will praise teachers as well, because I didn't realize this when I was in the classroom. And you probably do have students who come back and like, I did not realize how thankless of a job it can be, right? You don't see the reward of your work until years later. Like, I didn't appreciate everything Mr. Stevens did until now I'm in his shoes, and I'm like, you did so much for us that we didn't even see. And so we're so lucky to have people who step into the classroom and want to just teach kids. So I am excited to give back.
You've got great teachers, you've got good teachers, and you've got really, really bad teachers. And they're not equal by any means, and getting somebody that is having that much influence on a kid to inspire them to go to the next level or to tap in a skill that they didn't know that they even had, that's a big deal. But I'll be in the most random place, and somebody will come up to me and say, Mr. Roden. And I'll have to kind of do a double take because
Yeah.
they're older, but I really do love that, and I still love it. And I'm obviously in the corporate world, but I will always have some connection with education at some level. And what I just described, and what you just described, that passion, is why I wanted to do, this podcast series, hearing the stories of quiet heroes, the people around us, these various careers that are really making some significant changes and influence. Is there anything that you would like to share with the audience, and whether it's teaching them something about agribusiness, the future of agribusiness? What are some things there that you would like to cover?
I guess an important one would be if you are a girl and you want to be a welder, or you want to be in production ag, or you want to be an agriculture education teacher, step into the space and make noise. Female ag teachers are actually on the rise. I think they might have taken over. And so I think if you would ask like my grandpa Roden, if he would have thought that would be a thing, he would probably say no. And so it's so neat to see us taking up space or sharing space because, it doesn't take away from all the things that males have done in the industry and what females are adding. Like there's space for both of us. And so, but if you want to be a female welder, or you want to be a female in trade, you want to be a female in agriculture, just go in there and make noise. And if it's not for you, don't be afraid to change direction or avenue either. And I guess on the note of agriculture is if you're a consumer, take time to learn about all the things that they are doing and how, they have your best interest in mind and they're good stewards of the land and, you know, their business is built on keeping the land sustainable as well. So, we're all on this together and maybe grow an appreciation for agriculture.
I do want to touch on something really quick and we'll close everything out. Can you talk about the difference between the family owned farm and ranch and some of the big operations? And the example I give, I live in Dallas, but I drive all the way to Keller, Texas. So it's a good 45 minutes from where I live to go to this particular butcher to buy my brisket, and I buy several things there. But I go to it's called Z Bar, and it's owned by a family. It's actually a ranch, but I drive that far because of the quality of the food and the protein. So what's the difference between the family-owned operation and the larger ranches that become commercialized and maybe some of the protein being purchased overseas? I always ask if I do get in a situation where I've got to go to a store, I want to know where that cow came from. Is it overseas or is it USA?
I think that's a fair question. I think sometimes it comes down to preference. Like there are cuts that I'll buy at Walmart and it doesn't really bother me. If I know that I have a producer local who's doing, straight direct to consumer operation, I will go support them because they're getting more of that dollar return, right? Than versus those contracts maybe. I think it comes down to preference, but I really do appreciate, of course, like you get to see the person who's growing it, who's doing all of that. And I think it adds
It's
that.
the stories, they tell you the story and you're like, oh, I love this. So yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
it adds the human element that we're maybe lacking when we go to big box stores. I totally agree with that. I think it probably does more with that ag literacy and ag advocacy we've talked about. But yeah, I think it comes down to preference. But I also will say, like, I think there is an increase on wanting your products to be here in America. And I think that just depends again on preference. But I also like to think that it comes down to like wanting to support American agriculture. And so I would always be for like a label that says something like that, where it's homegrown or locally grown. I think that's a good use of labeling versus the GMO labeling and stuff that we had talked about previously.
Now you're getting your master's. What's the next stage? You think you get your doctorate?
I don't know about that. Maybe. I really like the idea of a master's, first of all, to give back to like the classroom I'm in, but I would also like, if I could make it work, offer like dual credit in my classroom because that would already be that interaction to, what students want to do and then connecting it to college. But also, I just want to learn how to be a better teacher too. And so I'm looking at the Kansas State University program. Where we've got to meet with some of those people who are part of that college, and it just like I'm so excited because they're so passionate about agriculture education and all of those things. So I think it'll be a really good fit.
Bailey Rodin, thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us and all the things that you've accomplished. I'm proud of you. I know that your father and your family's proud of you. And it's no surprise to me the influence that you're having on the youth in your classrooms and agricultural industry. I think they're lucky to have you involved and just really look forward to seeing what you do next. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jeremy, and letting me come on here and talk about all the things I love agriculture, education, and women in ag, and just getting to yap about an undervalued industry for a while. Thank you.